So what happens now?
I think this will be the perfect time for us to divide and conquer. You go over to Miss Corbin's cabin and see if Miss Marston is there. If she is, ask if she can confirm her cabin mate's movements last night. Meet me by the clock at the ground stairs in an hour's time.
Very good, sir.
It's open. Found anything?
So far, I've interviewed 2 people of interest. One of them claims to be fond of you. Do you know anyone by the name of Jane Corbin?
Jane? You've spoken with her?
She says that the 2 of you were engaged, but Mr. Tolliver interfered. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Can you describe her relationship with Tolliver?
Not really. I've known her for as long as I've known Mr. Tolliver. He was more than eager to take me on as a secretary, but once Jane and I met, that's when things changed. He suddenly became hot-headed with her and doubled the workload with me. I suppose he liked the 2 of us individually, but loathed the idea of us together. It didn't come to a head until last month.
Why do you think that is?
Maybe something to do with the mill fire? If she came too close, she might discover something wasn't meant to be discovered.
Really? Like what?
I don't know. But maybe these 2 letters I found in Tolliver's stash might shed some light.
Caleb Tolliver. Compensate us. Stop. We demand justice. Stop. Your foreman's widow, Mrs. Darcy McGowan. Seems that Tolliver had more enemies than he let on. What's his second letter? You thought you could get rid of me that easily? Think again. I'll give you one last chance. Pay up what you owe me, or you'll pay in other ways. A foreman and a chief engineer. I don't think we need Sherlock Holmes to deduce some connection there.
These letters were in the packet of mail I picked up from the purser's office yesterday afternoon. Do you think either of them are on board?
I have the passenger list and crew roster right here, sir. I'll see if I can cross-reference the names on the letters.
Thank you. Just out of curiosity, Mr. Campbell, in your pile of documents here, is there anything sensitive? Perhaps something to do with the mill fire?
The mill? What does that have to do?
It may have everything to do with this case. These 2 letters, a foreman and a chief engineer. Obviously, the chap named Bennion can't possibly be the ship's chief engineer.
No, Mr. Bell's been with the White Star Line for 21 years. Spotless record.
Naturally. Perhaps the foreman and chief engineer of interest may be the ones from the Myron Mill itself.
That's rather a stretch, don't you think?
Maybe not. We already have one link to the fire, the injuries you sustained. What is to stop us from finding another?
But that makes no sense whatsoever. As far as everyone knew, the fire was a pure accident. They could never prove that Tolliver burned it down for the insurance. And in any case, how could Tolliver get the resources to cause a deliberate explosion?
Perhaps there is more to this than what is on the surface. As for myself, I don't believe it was an accident. I believe it was in fact deliberate.
But
not by Tolliver, obviously, but by someone who had the resources, as you say.
Mr. Gethin, with your permission, I'd like to weigh in on the matter.
By all means.
I'm afraid I'd have to agree with Mr. Campbell. The idea of connecting the murder of one of our passengers to an incident that occurred 2 years ago, deliberate or not, is simply fantastic. That being said, I do confess to a mild bewilderment that we do have 2 surnames that match with the ones in the letters.
Oh?
On the passenger list in 3rd class, we have one Mr. Jamie Darcy McGowan.
His middle name can't possibly be a coincidence.
And the other is on the crew roster, sir. One Dylan Bennion. Engineering crew. Stoker to be exact.
I'll save them last for questioning. In the meantime...
Begging your pardon, sir. We were changing posts outside the gentleman's door, keeping it under guard like you ordered, and upon closer inspection, we noticed the door was left ajar, and well, you may want to come take a look, sir.
Good lord. You'd think the ship capsized or something.
Any other ship, maybe.
When did you say you last left this room?
25 minutes past 9.
Did he say whether or not he locked this door?
He never hinted towards it.
Any signs of a break-in? Has the door handle been inspected?
That would be irrelevant, sir. The door's locked on the inside. Apart from the occupants, the stewards can come in at any time to make up the rooms. That means the outside is left unlocked at all times.
Anything missing?
Not that I know of. Anything sensitive he would have left with me.
Seems these got the worst of it.
These are his blueprints, future commissioned projects, and so on. He keeps the plans of future ships that he's been commissioned to construct with his steel. Christ.
What is it?
If someone did break in, they won't be back to try again. One of these is missing. I know because Tolliver kept inventory of his papers.
I think I might have an idea as to who took it and why. Mr. Moody,
Sir?
send someone to find Brigadier McIntyre. Ask him to meet me by the grand staircase.
Aye, sir.
What will you do now, sir?
Well, as long as we're on this deck, we have another person of interest to question. Right across the hall.
Well, I'm not one to speak ill of the dead, but I only have one regret, that he wasn't killed sooner. The pig got what was coming to him.
Do you feel strongly about the matter?
I always believe in an act of God.
Last I checked, Lady Galloway, God does not appoint human beings to commit a sin such as murder.
A shepherd is considered a butcher if he strikes down his own sheep. But by killing the wolf, he saves the entire flock.
So you consider this particular murder a good deed?
Absolutely.
So much so that you would perform said good deed yourself?
That has to be the most idiotic, insolent.
Lady Galloway, I am only trying to establish facts. Everyone that I am questioning had at one time or another interacted with him during this voyage.
So, if you want to question someone on this ship who disliked him, you'll question 2,200 people?
I doubt 2,199 people knew him, let alone had reason enough to kill him.
They should have reason. He was a horrid man. Nothing but a deceitful, spiteful man. Just like all men, spiteful, deceitful cowards.
You must feel very strongly about the male of the species.
I've no use for them.
Not even to keep things running in Parliament or Congress in America?
Not if the suffragettes are successful.
Right, and good luck to them and all that, but what about the less than fine qualities of life? You'd rather the men all work the earth and have meaningless lives?
Women are capable of doing anything that men are capable of, if they put their mind to it.
Especially when it comes to committing murder. Now, don't get me wrong. You're within your right to your opinion. But are you really in favor of women's rights, or are you just in it for the purpose of acting superior to men?
This is pure badgering. You're dealing with a murder, not my distaste in men.
Or husbands?
What?
You didn't seem to get along with Mr. Allison on the first night out. And as you were leaving, you turned your head and looked as if you wanted to slap Colonel Astor in the face.
Women who marry are weak-minded creatures. They've been groomed and brought up in society only to be courted and made into wives who sit at home and sew and tend to their children.
But why not let these families who've done nothing to you live peacefully? Why must you hold a grudge against all of them? Perhaps you're projecting your hatred of husbands because you've had one yourself?
I beg your pardon?
I know a thing or two about lords and ladyships back in England. There is no unwed spinsters of high status that go by the name of Galloway whatsoever. But there was once a Sir Louis Alexander Galloway, barrister to the King's Bench. There wouldn't by any chance be a connection between him and yourself, would there?
I don't see how this is relevant to...
It was no secret that your husband loved you and you loved him. But something happened. It shattered your world, and in doing so, shifted your view of husbands altogether. You call them cowards. But why?
My husband killed himself. The last trial that he represented the crown for. The court ruled in favor of the defense. My husband went into shock. The humiliation of such a defeat was too much for him. He was no longer the brave and strong man I once loved. He was weak, and his weakness overcame him.
But losing a trial does happen. That is expected. Your husband surely has lost a trial before. There's nothing significantly wrong about that at all.
Not when the opposition is Caleb Tolliver.
Really? For what offense?
For being responsible for that factory of his. The one that burned down. We were sure it was for the insurance money.
I begin to understand. Your husband did everything by the book on his part, correct?
Everyone was certain that Tolliver would be hanged for his crime.
Oh, that's a rather harsh sentence, don't you think? All for committing arson for insurance?
Lives were lost, Inspector. If the fire turned out to be intentional, and Tolliver knew that there were still workers inside, the charge goes from involuntary manslaughter to first degree. That makes it a capital charge. English law deems execution as capital punishment. The jury looked as if they were going to do the right thing, but at the last moment, they declared him not guilty. I've never seen my husband look white as a ghost before in my life. It ruined him. The next day, when I was out at the market, he committed suicide. He was found at his desk with a suicide note underneath his teacup saucer. They found traces of potassium cyanide in his cup.
Ah, yes. I remember the headlines. My condolences.
Oh, spare me the grief. The man was a coward. He took the easy way out.
And by killing Tolliver, perhaps it would have brought justice to Sir Lewis?
My husband committed God's one unpardonable sin. You think I would instigate justice by committing another? Besides, if you're desperate for a culprit, why not look for a tall man with a dark overcoat and a cap covering his face?
You saw this man with Tolliver?
Of course not. At 9:30, I summoned a stewardess for a hot water bottle. An hour later, she had still not returned. So I opened my door to see if she was within sight. When I looked in front of me, across the corridor, I saw a strange man.
Was he alone?
Yes.
Was he waiting outside Tolliver's cabin?
No, he was knocking on the side door.
And what time did the stewardess arrive with the hot water bottle?
11:30. The most unprofessional tardiness I've ever experienced. I shall have her number before the end of this voyage.
Indeed. Well, that's all of the questions that I have, Lady Galloway. If I have any more, I'll do my best to ask them at a more agreeable time.
I hardly think you'll find me any more agreeable after today, Inspector Gethin.
Good afternoon, ma'am. Ah, Brigadier. Just the man I was looking for.
A young officer had mentioned you wished to speak with me.
Indeed I do. May we adjourn to a rather private area?
If you don't mind, we can go down to my cabin. I need to rest my feet.
Of course.
But that's preposterous. I grant you, good sir, that I hold no regrets that the man is dead. But I cannot believe you would think I had anything to do with it.
Be that as it may, Brigadier, I need to establish facts. Can you provide me your whereabouts between 11 last night to 1 a.m. this morning?
I was here. And that physician, Dr. Brooks, can verify that. I had been examined for nerves after yesterday's incident.
Ah, yes, I heard about your altercation with the victim in question. After Officer Lightoller interceded, Tolliver said something about you prying something from his cold, dead hands, and according to Mr. Lightoller, you replied, if it should come to that. Would you care to elaborate?
I was merely saying that someone else would come to him seeking retribution for his insolence.
Are you sure it wasn't for any stolen property?
Any what?
On our first night out, you mentioned a deal falling through with Tolliver. This morning, we found his cabin turned inside out, and one blueprint missing.
Now you accuse me of...
It may not be an accusation per se if the property is indeed yours. Upon further inspection, the blueprints all have different signatures on them. If that blueprint is indeed your property, I will drop the matter entirely.
Boy, there's a rolled up parchment underneath my bed. Fetch it.
Yes, sir.
I approached him to commission a new concept I personally drew up for a new kind of dreadnought. The deal fell through, and yet he denied having my blueprints, which were my rightful property.
And this was the only thing that you took from his cabin when you broke into it?
Yes, and I admit that freely.
But how did you know that the cabin would be empty? For all you knew, he could have walked in on you at any given moment.
What did that matter? He was dead, wasn't he?
But if you didn't do it, you wouldn't have known he was dead. Unless you were an accomplice at the very least.
Fine. For all I knew, he could have come in. But that was a risk I was willing to take. It happens in wartime. I would have fought him, given the chance.
Moving on. You said that this was a blueprint for a new type of dreadnought.
Yes?
Just for my own curiosity, why would an army brigadier design plans for a new type of dreadnought? I'm no expert in the field, but I'd say that would be a matter for the Navy, wouldn't it?
There's no segregation between the two branches.
Certainly, but you're a brigadier. You have medals. Why would such a man not be proud of his achievements in the army, such that he would want to start over in the Navy? Unless there was an achievement he was not proud of.
This is nonsense.
Perhaps an event in the last war preyed on his mind so much that he thought perhaps he could bury the dead by starting a new chapter in life. Perhaps a revolutionary new design for our battleships would prove clever so that this man could redeem himself, and the skeletons in his closet long forgotten.
How dare you, sir?
I'm just trying to get to the truth, sir. As long as it has nothing to do with the murder, then I will drop the matter. What happened that should prey on your mind so much?
Magersfontein. The Boars. Bloody Sunday, we called it. My division never stood a chance. Many times I've spent sleepless nights over that fateful day. Do you think I don't know what it feels like to have dozens of my own men wiped out in front of me? I should have died with them.
You did your duty in the name of king and country. No one blames you for merely surviving.
The medals serve as reminders. I'd give them up gladly if it meant bringing back my men.
I understand. And this is why you approached Tolliver?
I figured if this new design worked, people would no longer look at me as if I were some traitor.
You said that the deal fell through. Do you have any idea as to why?
Damned if I knew. After my initial meeting with him, I spoke with the Admiralty about my new prototype. They wanted to take a look at the facility that would produce the materials needed for my prototype. That's when things fell apart.
This wouldn't by any chance have anything to do with the Myron Mill fire, would it?
Why, yes. But how did you...
I wonder if you can tell me, Brigadier. What makes your prototype stand out more than other dreadnought designs?
My designs involved a double layer of skin.
But
I know that this ship has a double skin. I'm talking of a different method. The double layers would stack against each other, covering the ship's hull, but they would not cover the bottom of the ship. Visually speaking, it would look as if an entire profile of the ship's hull was sailing along with the ship itself. In short, their purpose would be to help defend against shelling, thereby delaying damage to the actual ship itself.
oh, absolutely genius, Brigadier. I almost wish I could see this demonstrated myself.
Well, I doubt there would be a need for it.
There will always be a need for it. And I hope that another company picks up your design and you live out the rest of your life in peace.
Thank you.
The breaking and entering incriminates him with evidence of premeditation. And with Tolliver out of the way, McIntyre stands to profit alone from his design, if it meets with success.
But
Opportunity poses an obstacle. Even if he did jab Tolliver with a syringe, he wouldn't have been able to run quick enough without being spotted. Also, we have Dr. Brooks' statement to obtain. I suggest we part ways again. I will speak with the doctor now, you trying to find the von Gutenbergs. Have them meet with me in their cabin.
very good, sir.
Yes?
Well, Doctor,
I took a blood sample from the body and was finally able to examine it. I had my suspicions judging from the position his body was found in, but I can confirm it was in fact a lethal dose of strychnine,
sounds quite serious.
and horrifying to the victim. When an overdose of strychnine enters the body, the victim arches their spine backwards in a U-shaped pose. Death would have been close to instantaneous, and rigor mortis would have set in very quickly. If you ask me, whoever did it was very knowledgeable about the drug. How's the investigation on your end, if I may ask?
You may, and as it turns out, there's actually two things you can help me with.
Oh?
Firstly, I need to verify Brigadier General McIntyre's alibi. He claims that you examined him yesterday for nerves.
That is correct. He became very agitated when he had his altercation with the deceased. When he raised his cane and was stopped by Tolliver, he nearly went into shock.
The term battle fatigue was mentioned.
It's a psychopathological state characterized by a disturbance of significance, sometime after an event of intense emotional shock. This is a dominant sensation in military figures.
And when you examined him, did you prescribe anything to calm his nerves?
Just a mild sedative of Trianol to help him sleep the rest of the night. I stopped by his cabin to give it to him at around 10:30 p.m. The amount I gave would have put him out of commission for a good 7 to 8 hours.
I see.
There's also physical strength, Inspector. Brigadier McIntyre doesn't strike me as the type to raise his hand and strike down a syringe with precise coordination and balance. A man as mentally unstable as the Brigadier would have jabbed the syringe haphazardly into Tolliver's back. The killer was knowledgeable about where to inject the strychnine.
Someone like yourself?
I beg your pardon?
You said it yourself. Whoever injected the poison was knowledgeable about its side effects, and the killer would have had to have had a syringe on hand.
That is absurd. What reason do I have to want to kill Tolliver? I am a man of medicine, for God's sake.
Well, for one thing, your attitude towards the deceased. During our encounter with him at dinner, you seemed reserved and averted his gaze frequently. This morning you showed no emotion whatsoever, except perhaps for a slight betrayal of relief. Secondly, who brings their equipment with them on a voyage for pleasure? That implicates the simple but glaring fact that you carry a syringe. What's to stop my assumption that you carry strychnine as well?
You are mad, sir. It is customary for physicians to carry their medical equipment wherever they go. Medical emergencies do not abstain from leisure trips.
All the same, the strychnine had to have come from somewhere. I doubt the ship's inventory carries it.
Of course not! At the risk of incriminating myself, I carry strychnine. It combats respiratory issues that I have been experiencing lately. Here is a copy of my prescription, and here is the vial of strychnine I use myself.
This stuff's powder. How could it?
It would have had to have been diluted with water.
Well, you were smart enough to admit your possession of strychnine, but I still want your explanation of your views of the deceased.
It was no secret that everyone hated him, Inspector. Why would I feel any different?
Aristotle once said, everything happens for a reason. Always. Perhaps Tolliver did something to you to make you hate him. Perhaps he put you through such torment that you've developed a respiratory issue.
All right, damn you. You want my reason? Here it is. 28 years ago, I helped deliver a child. The mother died in the process, and her brother had it in for me afterwards. He threatened to hand me over to the authorities over claims of malpractice.
Blackmail?
In a way, he never demanded money. He just put me in reserve, as one might say.
He must have had you owe him quite a handsome favor in order to compensate him.
Do you know he once stood trial last month?
The Myron Mill file?
Yes. He denied complicity in its destruction. Yet, according to him, there was one individual who was near the scene of the explosion, but he was taken to a hospital for injuries sustained by Tolliver's muscle men.
But surely...
Yes?
Never mind. Go on with your story.
This man, who was nearly beaten to death, had definitive proof of Tolliver's involvement in the fire. If he had been able to give his evidence, Tolliver would have been finished. But Tolliver forced me to swear that this man succumbed to his wounds.
So he had you commit perjury to save his own skin.
But in doing so, my debt was paid off. He hasn't bothered me since, at least until this voyage.
Who was the individual? The one that had evidence against Tolliver?
His chief engineer, Dylan Benyon, I'll never forget.
Well, you've been very helpful, Doctor. If you find anything more related to the autopsy, please don't hesitate to reach out to me.
Of course, Inspector.